So I missed most of the message on Sunday because I was in Revision Kids, but I heard that Craig talked about Zacchaeus. And I think the story of Zacchaeus is so cool and so powerful, especially for most of us who really struggle with loving others sometimes, especially those of us who struggle with loving difficult people. And Zacchaeus is the perfect example of someone who was difficult to love. He was a tax collector, he was a cheat, he was selfish. And this guy ticked all the boxes on like people we hate, people we assume are far from God, and people we have no interest in inviting in. He betrayed his own people, he robbed his own people, and he was a midget. He was one of those like short people. And I feel bad for short people. They're the last people to know when it's raining and the first people to drown when it floods. And we have them in all our groups. So just give a short person a hug right now. But Zacchaeus, so he's not only short, but he's a jerk, and he's just hard to love. And in this moment when he meets Jesus, I think it's impossible almost for us to understand the full level of the cultural weight of what happened and how hilarious it was to people that Zacchaeus was up in that tree. Because in that day and age, there are a few factors at play. Number one, it was undignified for a man to run. In part because they wore those like long dresses and you had to like hike up your dress to try and run along, and that was funny. And in part because a sycamore tree, well, or it was undignified to climb a tree. That was child's play. A dignified man like Zacchaeus would never do that, and he climbed a sycamore tree. And sycamore trees were poor people trees. They made a fig that was like not as good as a normal fig that poor people ate. And so here's Zacchaeus, this rich guy, this oppressive guy, this guy who's hard to love and easy to hate, who runs, not only climbs a tree, but climbs a poor people tree. Like the schadenfreude is high in this moment as everyone's looking at him, laughing, cracking up. But when Jesus looks up and sees Zacchaeus in the tree, he sees more than an angry elf. He sees a soul that is broken, a soul that's hurting, a soul that is desperately in need of love and acceptance. And Jesus calls him down and just invites him into community, invites him into this space where he can listen and talk and hear and show Zacchaeus that he sees him through a whole different lens than the world sees him through. Not this lens of anger and this lens of hatred and this lens of like being untouchable and difficult to love, but this lens of like, hey, I created you and I care about you and I care about your soul and your future and I love you. And it radically changes Zacchaeus' life. Just radically changes it. And in the grand scheme of things, he's like a hugely unlikely candidate to number one, even be noticed by Jesus because he was hiding up in a tree, but two, to be invited in and to have his life changed. This guy had been unrepentant for a really, really long time. And so nobody thought that day that Zacchaeus would have his life completely turned around, even though Jesus is in the turning around lives business. I think for us, that ought to give us pause in two spaces. Number one, we need to remember that we are unlikely candidates. That every one of us is selfish and broken and awful and sinful, just like Zacchaeus was, and none of us deserve to be called out of the tree by Jesus. None of us deserve the sacrifice of Jesus on our behalf. And I think sometimes when we fail to see ourselves like that, when we start to believe that we're worthy of the cross and worthy of Christ and worthy of being in his presence and we're so wonderful and so great, and we forget our own brokenness and our own level of awfulness that makes us ugly and difficult to love, then it's easy to put a hand out to others. It's easy not to show love to the people that are unlovable because we forget like what Jesus did for us. We forget the debt that we owe. And so when we remember that, it gives us a whole new lens. And secondly, I think we need to realize that there are a whole lot of people around us who are unlikely candidates, who are just sitting in the tree dying to meet Jesus. And I wonder, this Christmas season, like this season where those feelings of loneliness and those feelings of desperately longing to be included and to be in community, to be known and to be loved, sometimes get heightened because of the way this season works and functions in our culture. I wonder in this season who the unlikely candidates are in my life and in yours. that are sitting in the tree waiting to be invited in. And I wonder, what's it going to take? What's it going to take for us to see them the way Jesus sees them, to look up in the tree and say, hey, I know you're difficult, and I know you're hard to love, and I know there's a part of me, this broken, sinful, selfish part of me that does not want to invite you in, but I also know that you're a soul created in the image of God, who Jesus came and died for and loves, and you're longing for love and acceptance, and the thing that you need most is to meet Jesus and let him change everything about who you are and everything about your future and your eternity. I wonder what it's going to take for us to invite them in, because it's worth doing.